All right. Thank you. Good morning. Uh, I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation and Treaty 3 territory. My name is Neil Harden. I am chairing today's panel. With me via Zoom are Diane Knight and Stuart McPherson. The The assessor today is Jamie Fougere, and the administrative secretary is Belhan Rojo. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that may be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following a swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and be part of the public record. We'll be hearing items 1 through 5 on our docket today. Ms. Rojo, can you please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony?
Your assessor, please state your full name.
Jamie Fougere.
And you affirm the evidence you're about to present at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name. And you affirm the evidence you're about to present at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
All right. The first property on the agenda today is 895 Empress Street. I understand the issues are classification and value. So, Mr. Fougere, if you can start with the basic information, and then we will move on to classification.
Mr. Chairman, if it helps, I can advise that classification will not be pursued as a grounds, and we'd ask for it to be confirmed at this time.
Okay, thank you. So then, Mr. Fougere, you can proceed with the information and then your testimony on value then.
Great. Okay, so the address is 895 Empress Street, and the roll number is 130-961-12100. And this is the second year of the assessment cycle. Just for background, the 2023 assessment, which resulted in this value, the 2023 assessment was appealed, and there was a 15-1 agreement in place with another agent. And the value that we agreed to for the 2023 cycle was $17,458,000. And so I just wanted to let you know of that. And so we have a land area of 197,347 square feet, and then a plan area of 51,029 square feet. These buildings here were built between 2004 and 2006. And you can see an overhead shot of the property on the second page of my brief. And then we can see the Google Street View on the following page. Now I have two pictures here, and the one at the top is the most recent, but that is to show that one of the units, the sort of big box units, previously Easy Home, has gone vacant. And then across the parking lot, the other building that we had seen in the overhead shot is the CIBC here, and that's on page 4. And then on page 6, you can see my comparables. The ones that are bolded and italicized are banks. So you can see 1085 Ellis Avenue, 1565 Regent, 3369 Portage. And then on the following page, page 7, you can see the workup. Typically, we don't share the details of a 15-1 agreement, but as previously mentioned, this property has been appealed, and there was an agreement reached, and that is now the basis of this assessment for 2024. So you can see what was done on page 7. And so these are all overrides to the actual rents, with the exception of the second last premise. You can see is $4,936. You can see we used $24. I believe that is the previous tenant's rate. But I think that's one of the remaining sort of sticking points between our department and the applicant here. And then the capitalization rate remained the same from the original assessment. And then I'm just going to point out on page 9, we have roughly in the center, we have the retail kind of block of capitalization rates. And so we're looking at the power center / neighborhood property type. We've called it NSC. And so you can see basically the highs and lows between the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department, as well as Collier's, CBRE, and Cushman Wakefield. And so we're at 6.65 for our capitalization rate. And so that's my presentation. Thank you.
All right, questions, Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Fougere, when I looked at, I'm on your page 7 now, and I did have a chance to review the differences in rental rate, and I believe you're exactly right. Our differences, I believe, only relate to the unit of 4,936 square feet. So, and of course, both the rents shown on page 7 and what you'll see in our submission, then the rents in place are, with the exception of that vacant unit, then ultimately the rents in place are being used by the department for the purposes of this valuation, and it's not model driven, correct? For that component?
Correct.
Okay. A question then, now the 5% vacancy and the 3% non-recoverable and the shortfall rate, those are in fact model driven, right?
Correct.
Okay. The cap rate though at 6.65%, was that the initial model driven cap rate, or was that adjusted in the context of the other agent their discussions with you?
If you want to bear with me, I can verify that.
It's not crucial. I'm just that was something I wondered about, but it's okay, Mr. Fougere, if you don't have it in front of you. That's
so I was able to pull it up here, and it is in fact the original capitalization rate.
Okay, so that is a model driven rate.
Correct.
With respect to On your page 9, and you've alluded to it, the department is, of course, providing you with a summary table indicating a range for this type of property of between 6.35 and 6.95. But the department has not provided you with the specific analysis as to how those cap rates were calculated in this case, correct?
Well, I have reviewed and been part of some of the analysis for capitalization rates. So while I don't have anything further in my brief, I have been familiar with some of the properties that were looked at.
But they're not, that analysis is not, just to be clear, that analysis is not part of your presentation to the board this morning?
Correct.
And you mentioned the other agent, but again, just for clarity, Altus was not the agent involved in the 2023 appeal and ultimately the resolution of that matter, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, those are my questions. Thank you.
All right. Diane, do you have any questions?
I do not. I do not.
Stu?
Just clarification, you said that these, with the exception of the one unit of 4936, you said the rest are all rents that are in place? And
Correct.
we would have to go down to the rental return to find the terms and the actual dates and length of leases?
Correct. Yeah. So
they're all current leases? Like you say they're in place, but were they signed roughly within the year or two prior to the reference date?
So you can see them on page 20. They begin on page 20 of my brief. And to answer that question, they begin, we're looking at 2016, 2020, 2015, 2014, 2019. So, you know, they're none of them are post-reference, and they all are sort of either, you know, I guess up to, you know, 7 or so years before the reference date. But you know, our department was satisfied that they generally still represent market, and that, you know, on a whole, we believe that it's appropriate for this property. In terms of, you know, in the absence of a current lease with regards to dates for the vacant space, you can see on my page 11, I do have just a small chart that plots the rental rates that are in place with a start date that is prior to the reference date and an end date that is after the reference date. So they're, you know, the current currently what they're receiving for the spaces, and you can see basically the vacant unit is 4,900 square feet, and so you can see that basically halfway between the 4,000 square feet and the 6,000 square feet. There is another unit that is similar in size to the vacant unit, and you can see that plotted at it's at $22, which incidentally is what the applicant is seeking for that space. But you can see the trend line coming in roughly in around $25 for what would be, you know, 4,900 or so square feet. Just a little bit more information, since we don't have a lease in place or a reference date that would be appropriate to peg that size of unit, but just a little bit more information for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. with my questions.
Okay, and I have no questions, so you can proceed with your presentation, Mr. Reimer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So there are three issues that are under consideration this morning for the property. Probably the most, I guess I'd call it the most minor issue, relates to the slight difference in the potential net market income that we're applying. We're roughly $10,000 apart, and it relates exclusively to that vacant unit. So I'll talk briefly about that in a second. The other two issues, one of course being the non-recoverable expense allowance. I will, Mr. Chairman, be brief. I do recognize the panel members this morning, and I know you've heard it many times, so I'll take that at a very high level. And the last issue is capitalization rate. If I could ask the board members and Mr. Fougere, please, to turn to our page 11 of our main submission. I wanted to touch briefly on Mr. McPherson's question. So the summary sort of at the middle of the chart on page 11 shows the lease start dates and the lease terms for the various units.
Hello?
I lost you.
Oh,
Yeah, you cut out for
Sorry.
a second.
am I back now?
You're back.
Yes,
Okay, sorry, I'll go back. On page 11, the chart that's in just above the middle of the page shows the leases in place, the lease start dates and the terms, the end dates for the leases. And the rents shown there are the same rents that we're applying, that the department applied in this case, save and except.
You cut out again.
It is our network. 1 second.
You're back now.
I would say maybe just speak a little slower.
Okay.
Okay.
I've been advised to talk a little slower, Mr. Chairman, so I will try and do that.
Okay.
So the rents shown on the chart on page 11 are the same rents applied by both the department and Altus in this case, save and except for the vacant unit. The vacant unit of 4,936 square feet, we certainly between $22 a foot or $24 a foot, I'd suggest to you, based on the other indicators, they're both generally within the range. What we had reference to, though, is the January 2021 lease for unit 400, very, very similar in size, a little bit smaller, roughly 10% smaller, negotiated at $22 for that unit. And so we certainly found that to be a powerful indicator in this case. So we applied the $22 rate for that vacant unit based on, with having reference to everything in place, but specifically that very similar size unit with the lease commencing very close to the reference date. The bank, one comment I'd make is on the CIBC, which is shown as unit 895. It's the separate building. It is a two-story structure. So the rent at $27 a square foot is a little misleading, because that is not just the main floor bank, which is the overwhelming majority of the spaces the bank occupies. But in this case, it's a two-story. They are paying the $27 net rate for the entire building, both stories together, under the February 19 lease, and we are applying that same rent as well. Just for the information of the board, and I will not dwell on it because the rent difference is quite minor, but I am agreeing with Mr. Fougere that on page 12, we have a list of various types of rents, including retail, general retail, restaurants, banks, and we certainly believe that the rental rates in place are very much fall within the market indicators for other properties. And going further, the rents in place for the majority of them were actually negotiated very near the reference date, some as close as January of 21 and others going into 2019. So very, very good indicators we submit. The non-recoverable expenses I'll talk about in a minute, and the capitalization rate in this case. What I'll ask the board and Mr. Fougere to do is turn briefly to our cap study. Again, knowing that you've seen it many times, I'll be brief. But for the standard quality retail properties, the indicated range is between 6.75% and 7.25%, with the assumption that the full non-recoverable expense allowance of 5% is applied, 5 plus 2 for the quote unquote other allowance, as it's historically been known. So assuming that the full expenses totaling 7% are applied, the range is between 6.75 and 7.25. And what we'd ask, Mr. Chairman, is if the board is considering a rate that is lower than 5% for the non-recoverable allowance, that the capitalization rate be increased by 25 points. That's because of the methodology we apply in our cap rate analysis and the mathematical effect of reducing the non-recoverable expense allowance results in a indicated capitalization rate of roughly, usually between 31 and 33 basis points higher. But we are simply suggesting a 25 basis point increase should the board decide to go with specifically with the 3% allowance as a.
You cut out again.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, did you hear me through to the capitalization rate?
Not
Yeah,
quite.
and you didn't quite finish, no.
Okay, so essentially what we're asking is the range is between 6.75 and 7.25. And if the board chooses to apply a lower non-recoverable allowance, we're asking for the rate to be increased by 25 basis points. I will explain that in a few minutes. So then turning to page 14. The request this morning is to reduce the assessment to $15,762,000 based on the analysis shown on that page. It's using again a potential rent that's within $10,000 of the assessor, the difference only relating to the vacant unit, where we're applying $22 a square foot, applying the full 5% non-recoverable and a cap rate of 7%. If I could ask then, if the board and Mr. Fougere could turn briefly to our non-recoverable expense study. And
Okay.
so, as you've heard many times, Mr. Chairman, we continue to believe that the intent of that allowance has always and is an allowance intended to reflect a stabilized non-recoverable expense allowance that does not relate to management fees as they're normally known, which is the fees charged by a property manager for the property. We take no issue with the notion that management fees, those fees charged by property managers, are recovered. They typically are. But our submission certainly is that the non-recoverable expense allowance is something very different. And again, I'm going to be very brief. If I could ask the board members, Mr. Fougere, to turn to page 10. So in our analysis, there are essentially, there's really three components. There's a fourth component that arises very rarely. But the three main components included in our analysis were, for the non-recoverable expense allowance, were leasing commissions, professional fees, and advertising marketing. In some very few cases, there were some asset management fees, but they certainly do not have a significant impact at all in the analysis. They're very rare. Turning to page 11, then you can see our analysis of those specific expense allowances on the second column from the right, with an average of 6.64% and a median of 5.98. If one would account for the tenant improvements and inducements, which that's not what we're suggesting this morning, but if one were to account for those additional costs, which are typically non-recoverable, of course, the expense allowance is increased to something much higher still at an average of 10.66 and a median of 8.6. We provide that for information only. We're not relying upon that. We're rather relying upon the column that is second from right to justify the 5% request. Page 12, I talked earlier about the interplay between the non-recoverable expense allowance and the capitalization rate request. The basis of that statement, Mr. Chairman, it starts at page 12 and continues through to page 15. And what we've provided for the board's reference is a scenario using the exact same facts, the exact same assumptions as sale price, potential income, vacancy. The only change in the analysis that you see on those pages relates to the non-recoverable expense allowance. As you can see on page 13, using that same set of assumptions with the 5% allowance, the indicated cap rate is 7.38%. And I'll skip to page 15 because that's most relevant to our analysis. On page 15, those very same valuation assumptions, except for a reduction in the non-recoverable expense allowance to 1%, which is in essence what the department is presenting. The total expense allowance being 3% and the total expense allowance on page 15 being reduced so that it also equals 3%. That same capitalization rate analysis using that assumption results in an indicated rate of 7.71%. So it's about 33 basis points higher. Hence the request, if the board is going to apply a lower non-recoverable expense allowance, the request for the increase in the cap rate of 25 basis points. If I could ask the board members and Mr. Fougere then to turn briefly to our retail cap study. And again, I'm going to be very brief, knowing that everyone here has been through this many times. If I could ask just briefly the board members and Mr. Fougere to turn to page 5. Starting at page 5, Mr. Chairman, this is the pre-pandemic environment before the sort of the sea changes that came about as a result of the pandemic. But even prior to the pandemic, there was some question as to the strength of the retail market generally, and RioCan, and I'm in the sort of the second paragraph moving down on that page. RioCan, which is Canada's largest retail REIT, made some interesting statements, and the second indented paragraph was from a Colliers International report talking about RioCan and their investment strategy, and it said, if guidance for the future for retail in Canada is to be taken from this change in direction, where RioCan was moving away from retail, it may be that retail as an asset class is a questionable focus, given RioCan's move toward a more diversified portfolio. So it's an interesting commentary on the environment that was proving to be somewhat difficult even prior to the pandemic. Moving then to, I'll leave several pages, Mr. Chairman, for the board to read, or any questions that might arise from those pages. Happy to answer them, but for the purpose of brevity here, I'm going to move to page 10, if we might. And this is now, there's a substantial commentary as to the retail environment within the pandemic era itself. And a consistent theme in the reports and in the outlook through that period was the significant, and many believe the permanent shift away from brick and mortar purchasing to online purchasing. And there was a StatsCan article, and this is now in the third paragraph, the first indented paragraph on page 10, and it says a new report from StatsCan found that retail sales fell by 17.9% as Canadians increasingly sheltered in place between February and May, and brick and mortar stores closed their doors. Even so, shoppers rushed to make online purchases, with sales surging 99.3% during the period. So that shift, of course, was very, very pronounced, and the perception as to the longer term buying habits is also very interesting. On page, now starting at page 14, this is an article by the Retail Insider in January of 2021, just prior to the reference date, talking about the effects of the pandemic on many retail sectors. And you can see the highlighted title there. It says "No online stores, no revenues," and that's being pulled from the article. And at the bottom of page 15, which is from that same article, there's an interesting comment right at the bottom. It says a transformation in the retail industry has been happening slowly over the past several years. That transformation being the shift from brick and mortar to online retail purchasing sort of habits of consumers. But the pandemic accelerated the sea change. It was moving slowly before. Hutchison said, we're starting to see, bits and pieces, and it's really just accelerated at warp speed. Altus, turning now to pages 16 through 19 actually. Altus Group had actually had a very good opportunity during the pandemic, to conduct a number of surveys of some of the biggest property managers, property owners in the various asset classes, including retail properties, and some of the forecasts that were coming out based on these very sophisticated investors' perceptions certainly have a bearing on from our perspective, specifically on capitalization rates. If you move to page 17 is some bar graphs showing specifically the market rent trends that investors saw. But on page 18, I did want to draw the attention to the board at the bottom of page 18 and top of page 19. These are the perceptions of these, again, very sophisticated investors as to capitalization rates. And you can see at the bottom of page 18 for the top quality retail properties, the very, very strong feeling of these investors with the darker shaded graphs. I call it blue, but it may not be. My color perception is not always that great, but it's the darker bar graphs, and you can see that the overwhelming majority of these investors predicted an increase in capitalization rates of either between 25 and 50 points, or a significant number, even higher still, at between 50 and 75 basis points. And on the top of page 19 for retail lower quality properties, the effect was even more pronounced, where there was still an anticipation of capitalization rates increasing between 25 and 50 basis points for roughly 40% of respondents, but a much higher percentage, roughly 30%, anticipating increases in cap rates of between 50 and 75 basis points, and some even higher still. So certainly we'd suggest that in that environment, the capitalization rates, the trends were certainly moving very, very strongly towards higher rates. Then moving briefly, and this is the sort of the analysis that we've done on page 24. You can see the transactions for the retail properties that we've set forth there. They range from a low of, assuming the 5% non-recoverable expense rate is applied, they range from 5.92 all the way up to 8.42%. If the total non-recoverable expense allowance of 3% is applied, rather than the 5 plus 2 that we're using, that's the rates for the information on the board in the very right-hand column. That does have the effect of changing the rates from 6.18% all the way up to 8.78%. And I just wanted to draw your attention, Mr. Chairman. I talked about, again, this interplay between non-recoverable and the capitalization rate analysis. And the key in that, of course, one has to apply a consistent methodology when considering the capitalization rate analysis, as one implies with the valuation, which is what we're doing with the full 5%. And if you turn to, just as an example, if you turn to page 126 of the study, and by way of example, this is one of the properties we have in our chart. It's on Ellis Avenue, and you can see there that the non-recoverable expense allowance was 5%, along with the other structural allowance at 2%, and it indicates a cap rate of 7.39. Again, if one reduced that non-recoverable expense allowance from 5 to 1, that would have the effect of increasing that rate by, and our request would be 25 basis points. The mathematical effect would be closer to 30 basis points. So then for all of those reasons, and if we turn back to the valuation in our main submission on page 14, with the application of the slightly lower potential rent, 5% vacancy allowance, and the full 5% non-recoverable was plus 2 for structural and a cap rate of 7%, we come in at a requested value of $15,762,000. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Fougere?
Yes, please. So if you look at Mr. Reimer's brief on page 21. So Mr. Reimer, I'm seeing 2 columns that are lease from and lease to. And for the space, the bulk barn, which you're sort of using as an analog for the space that we have here that was vacant. So bulk barn, the first column that says lease from, lease to, It says October 3rd, 2015 to December 31st, 2025.
No,
And then-
Mr. Clear, I don't think that's right. Looking at that column, and unfortunately, it looks like they didn't make that column wide enough, but I believe the lease term is 10/3/2015 with then the end date, the lease to date of 12/31/2020.
Well, I'm looking at your page 21, and it looks like it's the first column. I would submit to you that it appears to be 2025.
Oh, okay, now I'm with you. You're talking about the third column from the right?
Correct.
Yeah,
From the
no, that's definitely saying 2025. Apologies, I misunderstood. I believe the second I thought the second 5-year term showing on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, on the seventh,
Right.
on the seventh column, it is actually a renewal.
Okay, so you believe this to be a separate term and not the second step of a 10-year lease?
You know what? You're right. When I look at that, because the leased from and to on the seventh column, I would agree with that. I think you're right.
Okay, I just wanted to double check on that.
Yeah,
what
I agree, because that seventh column, I mean, yeah, it's labeled lease from to, but that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to agree with you on that.
Okay. And the only other thing that I wanted to touch on was you've outlined the differences between our assessment or our valuation, I should say. I did want to submit that there is another discrepancy here, and that's sort of procedurally with a 15-1 agreement, just in terms of this isn't something directly in your presentation, but the act or the process that we're in of the appeal itself is more what I'm wondering. You would agree that when a property owner hires an agent or an outside party to represent them, it is taken then by the department, the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department, and the board and the property owner, that agent is representing the owner, and that really they're acting on their behalf and with agency for the owner. You would agree with that?
I mean, so if the question, Mr. Figueroa, if I understand the question, absolutely, and I'm not even sure who the previous agent was for 2023, but I'm assuming they had proper authority, 100%. But of course, our analysis, as you can see from this, our valuation and our analysis differs considerably from whoever that agent was. And the 15-1 agreement, I would expect that for 2023, that agent had done the best or had performed the analysis in a way that they were comfortable with. I'm, for the purposes of this 24 appeal, coming up with a very different value. And I believe you're not suggesting, I don't think, that we're not authorized by the owner in the case of this appeal.
No.
Okay, because we were engaged to complete this review and make this submission, but by the owner. Right.
So I just wanted to be clear that that relationship makes sense with all the parties, that the department then engages with the agent on behalf of the owner. And then we enter into an agreement through the 15-1. And so when, from our department, from our perspective, from the department's perspective, we understand that agreement to mean that we've arrived at a value that is agreed upon, for the intents and purposes of the municipal assessment or the municipal board. It negates any further appeal generally, and there may be instances where that's not the case, but would you agree that it's not typical that, say, the city of Winnipeg would come up with a superseding assessment for the following year? You would agree that once we've entered into a 15-1 agreement, we generally don't supersede that the second year of the assessment?
I can certainly agree. Absent a supplementary, Mr. Fougere, I would not expect the department to agree voluntarily, obviously agree with the value that I'm presenting this morning, because it is different than the agreement that you and the other agent reached, no question. So I don't disagree with that, but I'd suggest that this submission this morning for the purpose of the 2024 assessment, with us being the new agent and us coming to a very different conclusion, I'd suggest that our submission should very much be considered by the board, because clearly we're presenting, and again, I don't have the benefit of whatever, and I'm not asking for the basis of your without prejudice discussions with the other agent, but clearly whatever valuation assumptions that agent was making very much differed from our analysis based on, the Winnipeg and Manitoba market. So I don't believe our appeal is fettered in this way, but I agree with you. I would not expect the department to be in a position to agree that perhaps our value is closer to the mark. So I'm not suggesting that you would.
Right. Yeah, okay. I think those are my questions.
Okay, Diane, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so when a property is on its own building and it doesn't have any, it's just a property. Let's just say the CIBC was on its own and wasn't attached to the other properties, and it was empty for a year. Would there be no taxes paid on that then?
If it was empty for an entire year?
Yeah.
No, there absolutely would be taxes paid on it. There's specific relief for where you've got 100% occupancy of a property completely contained within the roll number for a full year. So that's a separate remedy though from an appeal. But in the meantime, absolutely, you're paying taxes on it, yes.
So, but this property, you're telling us there's no taxes to be paid on this property.
I'm sorry.
You're saying it's zero.
You lost me there.
So on this property, on that page, where you're putting vacant, on that page 21, you're putting vacant and you're putting no taxes to be paid on that property for the 4,936 square feet.
No, I'm sorry, Miss Knight. I don't understand the question. We're not suggesting that there would be no taxes payable on that space, and that's not part of our submission.
Okay, then I'm reading this wrong. Okay, go ahead. It's okay.
Okay, Stuart. Stu, any questions?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, the question I have, when did that property become vacant?
You're talking the unit 300?
Yeah.
That is a very good question.
I believe it was in 2019 in the spring, I believe. I think I have that written down. I have April 2019.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Fougere.
Must admit, I go fairly often to the golf town, but I've never really looked at any other property there. Okay, I have no more questions then. So, is there any summation that either party wishes to make?
I'm good.
I'm good as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's do one more property before having the break. So we'll do 995 Main Street. Let me open the files.
Now, before I get started, I did want to point out that I had sent a PDF file that was titled Recommendations for September 26th, 9 a.m. Boardroom B. And so for 995 Main Street, I will have a recommendation. And so that'll
Okay.
be the first page of that document.
Belen, do we have that?
Yes, it was distributed at the start of the hearing, so you may need to refresh your OneDrive.
Okay.
Because of the name of the document, it will sort to the bottom of the list.
Got it.
Ah, got it. Yep. I will just download it. Okay. All right, we got it. Okay, so you can proceed then, Mr. Fougere.
Okay, so the next property is 995 Main Street. The roll number is 140-228-90100. And so the original assessment was $3,095,000. And the land area here is 32,133 square feet. And the plan area of the building is 11,939 square feet. And just real quick, if you wanted to take a look on my page 2, you can see the property that we're discussing. And then next, I'll just bring up the recommendation that I'm proposing for 995 Main Street.
Okay.
And so as mentioned, we're looking at the 2024, so not the 2023, but the 2024 assessment, or the second year of the assessment cycle. And so you can see on the left-hand side is the original assessment that had gone out. And then on the right-hand side is what I'm proposing for a resolution. And so we've, using the actuals in place, we've looked to that in terms of some of the rental rates. And then we've also adjusted the capitalization rate. So overall, the assessment would go from $3,095,000 to $2,847,000.
All right. Okay, Mr. Reimer, how do you feel about that recommendation?
I don't have instructions, but I'm in agreement with that, and I intend to get instructions very shortly after the hearing.
Okay. Stuart, any questions on the recommendation?
I do not, thank you.
Diane?
Nope, thanks.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's take a 5-minute break. Or maybe, yeah, 5-minute break, and then we'll come back for the next property, 1701 Plessis. Okay, welcome back. We'll move on to our next property, which is 1701 Plessis Road. So, Mr. Fougere, you can begin on this.
So I'm just bringing it up here, 1701 Plessis Road. The roll number is 09006030,500. And so the original assessment for 2024 is 4,830,000. And the property has a land area of 87,616 square feet. And then a plan area of 12,409 square feet. And I do have a recommendation for this property as well, but just to give you a quick bird's eye view of the property, you can see on page 2 of my brief, it has both a gas bar and convenience store, as well as at the back of the property, towards sort of the residential area you can see behind, a car wash, as well as neighboring it, jut up against the convenience store is a McDonald's. And so you can see that a little bit better, perhaps on page 3 of my brief. So you can see the Google Street View of the McDonald's on the sort of the corner, and then the convenience store, gas bar, and then the second picture there is the car wash. And so, as mentioned, we have a recommendation here. Again, on the left-hand side is the original assessment. And then on the right-hand side is what I'm proposing.
Sorry, do we have that recommendation?
It's in with the other ones.
Okay.
Yeah, so the same document, just the second page.
Ah, got it. Thank you. I didn't look at the second page, sorry.
That's okay. So in this case, we've broken down the areas for the gas bar and car wash. Now, specifically for the space that would be the kiosk of a gas bar, or in this case, a convenience store. So to run the point of sales for the gas station here. And since our comparables that we have for our gas bars are relatively few and far between, the largest size that we have to go from is 800 square feet. So in reality, what I've done here is to try to look at the space as almost as though it were 2 units for the convenience store. So I've used the 800 square feet and attributed what would be the gas bar rent, and then filled out the remaining area with what I consider a reasonable sort of max or 7-Eleven type of rate. And then at the top, you can see 5,776. That is the drive-through car wash. And then finally, for the McDonald's space, it's the 4,086 square feet. We've used $34. And the only other change is to the capitalization rate. And I'm proposing that we go from 6.2 to 6.5. And we've just below that, you can see a lump sum of $278,000. That is for the gas equipment. And so our original assessment was $4,830,000. We are proposing $4,252,000.
Okay, Mr. Reimer, how do you feel about that recommendation?
I'm in agreement with 4,252,000.
All right. Diane, do you have any questions on this?
I do not, thank you.
Stuart?
I just wanted the little breakdown of that cost adjustment of 278. Did you say that's for what, pumps, tanks, island?
Right. So that's for the canopy, tanks. Let me just bring that up here. So I have not provided a breakdown for it in our brief. And I'm not entirely sure necessarily how we would put that together, but I will bring that up if you don't mind just hanging on for a moment as I.
Yeah, that'd be
I
that'd
guess
be
I
a
could,
cost approach, wouldn't it?
Yes, and it is a sort of a blend of approaches when it comes to gas stations, because the rental information that we receive from gas bars is actually only the land lease. So a gas company would lease the land that the building and the tanks are on, but under the Municipal Assessment Act, we are required to value the land and buildings. So we count the land through the rental income that we are then applying to the kiosk, the place that has the convenience store, in this case, the place that has the point of sales for the gas station. And then we add the cost of the tanks, pumps, and canopy. I'm just gonna double check that I'm not missing any items that would be included as part of that. So I've got it up. I've just got to take just one moment to get to the right screens. Okay, so we have the fuel dispensers, so the pumps, and tanks, and then the fuel pump shelter, so the canopy above the tanks. And there's another tank. Yeah, so we have 3 tanks. As they would relate to the different product types. And then we have the one canopy. And finally, sorry for the wait here. Finally, we have the 3 set of pumps.
and I'm assuming this is consistent with how all the gas bars are treated within the city.
Correct. That's
Okay.
right.
And just one final question. An above ground propane tank, would that be accessible?
That's a good question. I do not see it listed here as an item that is part of the property or being assessed. But that's a very fair question.
Okay, I thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I have no questions, so thank you for that. Let's move on to 630 Kildare. And I will just open the files. I understand you have another recommendation here.
Right. So the first property of 2 that are side by each is 630 Kildare Avenue East. And the roll number is 0900-129-0500. And so the original assessed value that we have for 2024 is $3,899,000. And the land area that we have is 55,687 square feet with a plan area of 14,380 square feet. And just quickly on page 2 of my brief, you can see the parcel that has the thicker purple outline. That is this one. This is 630. We'll be looking at 630, or excuse me, 620 after this property. And then you can see the Google Street View of the property a little bit better on page 3 of my brief. And so it's basically a strip mall that's located in a broader sort of neighborhood shopping center type of context. And so if you want to take a look at my 3rd page of the recommendations document, we have what we're proposing for this one. And so the original 2024 assessment for 630 Kildare Avenue East is on the left-hand side, and the proposed reduction is on the right-hand side. And so we've gone to actuals here, and then we've which has actually slightly increased the rental overall rental income. And then we've also adjusted the capitalization rate from 6.4 to 6.75. And so the overall assessment goes from $3,899,000 to $3,702,000.
Okay, and how do you feel about that number, Mr. Reimer?
We're in agreement with that revised value of 3,702,000. Thank you.
All right. Stuart, any questions on this one?
I do not, thank you.
Diane?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to our last property then. This is going faster than I thought it would. Last property, 620 Kildare. Let me again just open the files. Okay, on 620 Kildare.
So 620 Kildare Avenue East, the roll number is 0900-129-1500. Excuse me. So the original assessed value applying to 2024 is $2,823,000. And there's a land area of 27,528 square feet with a plan area of 9,980 square feet. And as you saw on the last brief, you can see this property on the second page of my brief. Again, the thicker purple outline is relating to this particular roll number. And so then you can see at the bottom of the page 2, it's again another strip mall type of building within a broader neighborhood shopping center context. And then in terms of the valuation, you can see what we're proposing on page 4 of our recommendations document. And the original 620 Kildare Avenue East assessment is on the left-hand side of the page, and then our recommendation is on the right-hand side. And so again, we've used actuals, and again, it's actually been a slight increase. And then we are going from 6.2 for the capitalization rate to 6.75. And that decreases the overall assessment from $2,823,000 to $2,716,000.
All right, and how do you feel about that, Mr. Reimer?
We're also in agreement with 2,716,000. Thank you.
Okay, Diane, any questions?
No, sir.
Stuart?
Being nitpicky here, I guess, but I just wondered, like, your cap rate is 6.75%. and that's an increase from the 6.2 originally. The comparable property we just dealt with, 6.75% cap rate, which is the same, but the cap rate was originally 6.4. So there was an actual difference in the cap rates originally. I just wondered, is that something that you felt wasn't justified in this circumstance?
Well, they are. It is a product of mass appraisal that we have it. The capitalization rates being sort of a gradual type of situation with the modeling, whereas it takes in information to account, such as the size of the building. So I believe that difference, that 0.2 difference in capitalization rate for the original 630 to 620, I believe that relates to the overall size of the building. Now just looking here, because obviously we are in the same area, they're similar vintage. I would be surprised if they're different years of construction. And given the fact that they are one economic unit, they sold together, and the income and expense returns are submitted together, I think it's a fair thing to do to match the capitalization rates.
Yeah, I thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much. I guess we've heard now all the properties on their agenda, and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you very much for your presentations once again.